Stephen Datz. I have Stephen Datz on property in the gallery. Came up for a big show that we were having on the Maynard-Dixon Homage along the Distant Mesa. He was about to go home to Colorado. I said, "Hey, Stephen, wait. How
did I get here again?"
Yeah, stay for a little bit longer. I need 1 hour from you so I can find out about your life. Yeah. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's good to be here.
What's it like to be out of cold and snow?
I don't like it. I like the cold and snow.
You do like it?
Oh yeah.
Funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Tucson is lovely, and I had a great hike up Finger Rock Canyon yesterday morning. Great trip up to Windy Point last evening to get some light up there. But yeah, I miss the snow. I like wintertime a lot.
Grand Junction, right?
Grand Junction, yeah.
Now, were you born and raised in that area? Where are you from originally?
No, originally born in Denver. And I lived my earliest years of my life in Denver and then Aurora, back when Aurora was basically a street next to a wheat field. And then my dad, at some point when I was around 10, decided that Denver was just going to hell in a handbasket and the crime and whatnot. And our neighborhood was going downhill fast. So he said, "We're moving out of here. We're going to Loveland." And so Loveland is where I spent my adolescence from age 10 on through till...
And what year would have that been that you moved up there?
So we moved to Loveland in 1980. And at that point in time, again, my neighborhood was kind of out on the ragged western edge of town. It was just wheat fields and hay fields all the way to the Namaqua Hills and up into the mountains. But yeah, it was a great place for a kid, young boy running around. I had a bunch of other friends and we ran around and pretended to shoot at each other, and we threw mud pies at each other, and did the stuff boys do. Got scraped up a lot.
And did you was Loveland doing the sculpture stuff at that time?
At that time, it was kind of on the horizon still. It wasn't really the thing that it is today. So there were some sculptors there, I think, around that time. I know Hollis Williford in particular was there, but it wasn't really the sculpture capital yet. That kind of happened a little bit later.
Yeah, when did that happen?
Well, my recollection is a little bit fuzzy because I left in 1987 to go to college. And I wasn't really, during my school years, I wasn't really aware of what was going on in the art world in Loveland. So I think that...
Were you aware of the art world? In other words, were you doing art at that point in time? Had you found that kind of outlet yet?
Well, so yeah, the outlet, the impulse to draw was always there. I've been drawing almost as long as I can remember. One and sundry things, here or there, whatever I happen to feel like drawing. I was big into science fiction as a kid, so I was drawing spaceships and alien creatures. And then when I got to my middle school years, I got into Dungeons and Dragons, so I was drawing monsters and character profiles for all my friends.
And that's when you're in Loveland at that time, right?
Yeah,
middle school.
Yeah, middle school
to high school.
Middle school to high school. Yeah, And
were you doing art classes? Did you take art classes?
Yes. So those were a fixture of my curriculum all the way through. Although it was I guess it's maybe not what you might expect for the average art person, but I happened to be in a school district that was doing a pilot testing program when I lived in Denver. I was in elementary school, and they came through and they made us come to school on a Saturday, and they did this battery of tests, and we had no idea what that was for. Well, apparently that was an aptitude screening exam. Like they were trying to figure out, how do we find out what kids are good at? So that came back, and my scores in math were high, and my scores in science were high, whatever that is for a sixth grader, fifth or sixth grader. But that sort of dictated the curriculum that I had the rest of the way through my school years. So I had this weird dichotomy of like hardcore biology, chemistry, physics, advanced math. I was always doing the AP class. And at the same time, I'm spending my afternoons in the art department or out in the parking lot drawing cars or whatever, doing this creative side of things.
So it was calling you.
Yeah, it was always there. And my art teachers were always very supportive and complimentary. And I had one guy in my high school art department who at a parent-teacher meeting basically said, your kid should be an artist.
Wow.
I think he's got talent. I think he could really go someplace with this. And he likes it. He's always the first one to class, and he's enthusiastic. So, but that didn't really cut much ice with my dad, especially, who, bless him, he passed on a few years ago, but he always just sought, I think, for me and for my brother, go get a good degree from a good school, get a good job, make a lot of money.
What did he do?
So Mark, he were kind of is reminiscent of you in a way, Mark. You remind me of him. He was a philatelic expert, and he wrote several books in the field of philatelics that are still today, 40 odd years later, considered the default reference books. So, for example, error stamps,
Yes.
Misprints, misperfs, those sorts of things.
So like the biplane that was flipped upside down,
Yes,
that kind of thing?
that's the most famous example. But
See, I knew one, though.
Yeah, see,
I don't know how much it was, 3 cents?
It was like a
2
3-cent stamp, and the last I heard, the thing was practically considered to be priceless because it's so rare. It's one of only 3 in the world, or some such thing. But anyway, he was a philatelic expert. He was a stamp dealer. He would expertise things. He wrote these books. He went to trade shows.
Is that how he made his living, through stamps?
Yeah.
Buying and selling stamps?
Yeah, he had 2 businesses. He had his own business, General Philatelic, which was kind of an umbrella for all of his philatelic endeavors. And then he had another business in partnership with a fellow out in California that dealt in other types of collectibles, especially autographs, pilot autographs, cosmonaut autographs. So air and space kind of collectibles. And over the years, those kind of just merged.
How did he get into that? Do you know?
He was a stamp collector as a kid. He was always into stamps, and it was just something that he I think felt like he had a knack for. He was good at it, and he understood stamps and collecting and stamp investing and all these things in a very insightful way. But I think in a way it was something he fell back on because out of school, like he graduated from University of Denver, and right out of school he started a little bookstore, and the bookstore struggled because Dad, being somewhat idealistic and somewhat literary person, wanted to sell literature. Mm-hmm. He wanted to sell good books. And that could mean anything from Shakespeare to Raymond Chandler. He loved all sorts of literature. He loved a good story. And he would later go on in his retirement to write a couple of like noir detective novels that revolved around philatelic pursuits.
He would have been competing against like the Tattered Covered Bookstore.
Yeah. I mean,
which is a phenomenal bookstore.
He had a little place in a strip mall, in Lakewood or someplace. And it just didn't do all that well, because I think when you're running an operation like that, the latest and greatest novel is going to be the thing that is going to make your bills. It's going to be the thing that pays your rent and everything. So it's not like a bookstore is completely absent of commercial considerations. And I think for him, he was just not offering that market what they wanted. So that ended, and the stamp thing, I think, if I understand right, was just what he did. Like, he had a skill set there, and he had a base of knowledge from all his years as a kid collecting, and then through college, and he had a business degree. So
that's why he wanted you to have a business or some kind of background where you could have a good, because that's how he saw you made a living.
Yeah.
He may have seen also, because he was a collector and dealt in things, that being an artist was going to be a hard grind, possibly.
Yes, and the other thing is he had a curious kind of fascination with the artists and the whole social change in the late 60s. He was living in Denver and attending DU at that time. I came along in 1968, but he loved to go down on his weekends and photograph the protests that were happening in Denver, and photograph some of the characters that lived like in areas. I think he mentioned Wazee Street back in the day as being kind of an area where there's a lot of artists and a lot of hippies and a lot of people that were sort of the new consciousness and all this. And he loved to talk to those people and photograph them. And what I didn't learn until much later in his life was that he had accumulated something like 25,000 words worth of just notes that he had made about people he had met. He had a huge book of slides that he had shot of all these people down in Denver in the artist community down there, in the hippie community. And all of this was done as kind of socking away character material for potential books that he was looking to write down the line. And I mentioned the two noir novels he did. He also wrote 4 other novels under a pseudonym that are very literary in their approach and interesting stories, but all based on his experiences. So he had seen how the artists down there lived, and he had actually befriended a fellow who ended up being an influence on me, Skip Whitcomb.
Yeah, who he is.
Yep, landscape painter,
Colorado
painter. And so he saw how Skip, was struggling and the trials and tribulations that he went through in the pursuit of this art. And he just, I think it kind of broke his heart because he saw the talent, he saw the drive and the talent that this guy had. And yet he just, it was just a terrible struggle to make a living as an artist. So I think in his mind, the idea was, you can never go wrong with a good, safe job. As long as you always have some money to pay your bills, you can do whatever you like at some point, but you got to take care of business first. And so that's where the encouragement towards go get an engineering degree or a computer science degree.
Right, especially because he saw you're bright in math and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I had grandparents that were all academic high achievers. My mom's father was a Harvard-educated CPA. He ended up being an accounting executive at DuPont. Her mother was a Smith College educated lady who, had she not met Pops, would have been well suited to any number of professional careers.
You wonder if your dad didn't get a little blowback from his parents when he became a bookstore seller and selling stamps.
I think that he did, and I
sure
suspect that. See, Dad always went his own way. He really
kind of like his son.
Yeah, well, the apple doesn't fall far. He was a very self-determining individual. He did not like collaborating. He did not like being given orders. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do the way he wanted to do it. And I think that when you have that, when you go that route, you're to a degree asking for trouble, because you've got a hard road ahead of you. If you don't play well with others, it's going to be tough to make a go of things. And when you're starting a business from scratch, with very little in the way of assets or capital or anything like that to back you up, you're really risking everything. If it fails, you lose it all.
Especially if you got kids.
Especially if you got kids. And I came along not too long after the bookstore went down, and then my brother came along 2 years later. So he had bills to pay, and I think almost more so from my mom's parents, the Harvard and the Smith College grads. My dad's father was a doctor, physician, and his mom was a nurse. And so I think he kind of felt the pressure to step up,
I'm sure
make it happen, get those bills paid, start saving for the college for those kids, and stop messing around with all of this esoteric, I want to be a writer or I want to run a bookstore or whatever. Just get down to business.
And was he successful at selling stamps?
Yes. Yeah. He actually ran for a number of years in Denver. He ran a trade show called Philafair, which was one of the biggest philatelic trade shows in the country at that point in time. He had an auction every year because he was often asked to appraise estate collections. Grandma passed away and the kids go and find this huge trove of stamps and have no idea what they're looking at. So he would appraise the collection, and oftentimes he would ask to buy, so look, I'll take this off your hands. And then he would parcel it out. So he would kind of take the really top level stuff, and that would become fodder for the auction. And then he would sell out the other stuff at the trade shows and things, because there were always people. These things were packed with people they would come up to your counter, and if you had face value postage, they would sit there and they would go through every box, every sheet, and they would inspect it, to see if maybe there was an error that somebody missed or.
Well, I think to be in that business, you have to be extremely meticulous. And it probably says oodles and oodles about your father too, if that was the way if he was good at it, because any little, just the smallest mistake or problem could destroy the cost.
Oh yeah. And that's one of the reasons why his books were so successful, because he really had a very detailed knowledge of all of the finer points, and in philately, there can be so many different kinds. There could be one image, let's say you've got a stamp with the face of a dog or an upside down biplane or whatever. The image can be transposed. Some of the color plates might be printed 90 degrees off. Mm-hmm. The misperforation might go through the illustration, or there might be no perforations on the sheet at all. The symbol for the denomination could be missing. So it'd be like, 40 what,
Clearly he had you going through stamps and helping him at some point in time.
Well, yes, I was. So my first work experience in life was as his assistant at the trade shows. He would have a booth, and he was often, had to go off and meet somebody, and he loved to wheel and deal. I think he almost loved making the deals more than anything. Like, I think that satisfaction. I can assure you he does. I did. That satisfaction was paramount for him.
So he ran around doing buying and selling trading.
Yeah.
And you kept the booth and tried to make a few sales here and there.
Yeah. 10-year-old Steve was at the booth.
Explain it.
Hi,
so
sir.
do you still have some of that collection? Do you have stamps or like them or any of that, or is that just his deal and that's it?
That was his deal. Yeah, I don't have a stamp collection. Dad really didn't. Oddly enough, he didn't collect many stamps. I think he saw them as a means to an end, and that end was a paycheck. So he didn't really hold on to too many of them. And even if he did, I wouldn't know to look at them right off the cuff, just what they were worth or anything like that. So
yeah, but you would know enough to look.
I would know enough to look, and I would know enough to realize, like, okay, if this, like, for example, if it's in a safe deposit box,
yeah,
I need to call up one of his colleagues and say, okay,
right.
Can you appraise this for me? Tell me what it's worth.
Do you know if that business stamps is still, I mean, it seems like that would just be a business that would kind of be dying because no one uses envelopes, no one knows mail. I mean, talking about a younger generation that really doesn't have any connection whatsoever to the process, is that just tumbled down in values and things, or do you even know?
I don't think it is what it once was. I think the advent of digital technology and print your own stamps at the kiosk in the post office, I mean, the philately purists, I think you hear them often decrying the sad state of affairs because stamps used to be art. That was one of the things.
And they were
about
fun.
it.
You could go collect them, right? You could get them from an envelope.
Yeah, you could get them off an envelope. I mean, he used to have envelopes. I remember every letter we got, we had to open with a letter opener. We were not allowed to just tear open the envelope. We had to open it with a letter opener and be very careful to preserve the stamps.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, this is the other thing that would happen, the post office would miscancel or not cancel it at all. I mean, there were all kinds of weird little things that it's like you'd think, I'm just licking a stamp and putting it on a letter. And somehow, if there's a mistake in the process anywhere along the line, it's valuable to somebody. It's like, whoa, look at this.
Or was it one time?
One time used with no cancellation. Somebody's interested in that somewhere. They want to collect it. But I think overall, the hobby has fallen on some hard times because there's just not as many people coming into it as there are leaving. And a lot of the old timers that I knew from the booth, all the guys that used to come by and say, where's your dad? I'm looking for him. I've got something I need to show him. I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know where he is at the moment, and he'll be back in, 20 minutes or so. And those guys have all passed on.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, their collections, some of them did collect, but those collections have fallen into the hands of, younger relations that don't really understand them and just are like, get this out of here. I don't want this is a mess. What is all this paper?
And what is a stamp, actually?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think it's quite dead, but I think there's definitely been a negative impact from
Did
the
you
years.
inherit that kind of collecting gene that want to have things like that?
I guess I wouldn't say that I inherited it. For me, I have not really ever developed a sentimentality around objects. I think maybe that's part of why I can do what I do. Because people often say, well, how do you spend all this time painting these pictures and then you just send them out the door to some unknown fate somewhere? You know, somebody's going to maybe buy it and then it's going to end up in Pensacola, Florida. And who knows? And it's like, well, yeah, but that I can make another one. You know,
that's what I do, right?
You know, that's what I do. I don't mourn them when they go. I can think of maybe 3 paintings in my whole career where I actually wish now that I could have them back.
And why is that?
Because I think they represent as close to a total and absolute success as I was capable of having at that particular moment in my career and with my skill set. They are paintings at which I can look now and I still wouldn't change a thing.
Have I had any of those paintings?
You've had so many, Mark.
I know.
Yeah, you have one in your collection, I believe.
The one, the snow piece?
The snow piece.
Yeah, I believe it.
The winter one.
Yeah.
That
was brilliant.
That thing,
I
kind of pine for it.
Yeah.
I look at it sometimes too on my computer and I go, oh.
It's in my bedroom. I look at it every night before I go to bed.
That to me was, that's a painting that's very close to my heart. Subject matter wise, season wise, color wise. I mean, it's just that painting more than many that I've done of the winter, wintertime in the desert. To me, that painting is winter in the desert. It just, it says it as best I could possibly say it.
So when you were a kid growing up and you're interested in art, you're doing art, your school teachers are telling you should go into art. Did you ever have any pieces that were presented in state fairs or put up where you won prizes or were on in the newspapers for that kind of thing at all?
Not really, but the art that I did in school, in my classes and with my, for my friends that were playing Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, that was all kind of just for me. And I never really entered many competitions. I mean, you got to keep in mind, the art side of my life was kind of just for me. It was never really valued very highly by my folks, or, I mean, it was like, that's cool that you can do that, but finish your algebra homework.
Right.
That's going to be the thing that takes
Quit
your drawing and finish your algebra. So if I could use drawings, I remember there was a science fair at my school. I was in 4th grade, I believe. And the theme of the science fair was, futurism. Like, what do you think the future is going to look like? And of course, being well steeped in Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov and all these classic sci-fi authors, I had this very well developed idea of what I thought the future was going to look like. And what that was a big asteroid with a space station built into it and lots of spaceships flying around it. So I did this great big, it must have been like a 20 by 24 inch drawing that I colored in with colored pencils. And then I made this little hand lettered thing below it that was like a look at the future, and I had my little essay about why I thought this was going to be the future was going to be, guys in space living on asteroids. And that I think is the only thing I ever won a prize for. And that got a honorable mention at the science fair.
And it was because of your drawing.
Because of the drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the judge was totally sold on the concept, but the drawing was impressive.
Yeah.
That's...
The Chinese just landed on one of the asteroids recently, too, like this last 6 months.
See?
You're right. You should have got at least a second place for that. Do you still have that drawing by any chance?
If I do, it's buried somewhere in my folks' closet down in Loveland, and I haven't looked at it for eons. I still have the ribbon because my mom has a box of all the things, all the certificates we got and the diplomas and all that stuff. So, and she's got that ribbon in there, I know.
So you did win a prize.
Yes. I mean, an honorable mention.
Yeah. Well, you were probably proud of it at the time, weren't you?
I remember being a little disappointed that I didn't place higher.
Because you spent so much time on the drawing.
I spent time on it, and I also didn't feel like robots was a very original vision of the future, like a robot serving you lunch at the lunch counter. How's that? Like, we practically have that now.
We do have it now.
Look at the poor people working behind the counter. They don't look very happy.
Yeah, no, we do have it now, and more is coming.
So
you graduate from high school, and you're really kind of been headed in science because and mathematics, because that's really what you seem to be known. At least your parents think that's what you are. You're kind of told this is who you need to be.
Yeah.
And so where do you go?
So I graduate from high school, and in that spring, in addition to all my regular schoolwork, I was put through a battery of college placement tests.
Like SAT kind of things?
SAT, ACT, and then ACT administered a bunch of specialized tests, which if you wanted to apply to like an MIT type of school, you had to take the specialized tests, and they were specialized in like physics, calculus, biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, those sorts of things. So I had to take 6 college placement tests. Most of my friends took 1 and they were done. And I was just in there week after week doing these brain bending tests. And so what that ended up qualifying me for was not quite MIT, but good enough to get into some other schools that were technically oriented. So I ended up having a day where a bunch of college scouts or something, people would come and interview prospective students. And there were guys like from Cal Poly and Stanford. And so there was a guy there from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And we sat down with him and we talked for 20 minutes. And he said, I think there's probably a place for you at Carnegie Mellon. Letter came the next week, and that's where I ended up, Carnegie Mellon. So my first semester of college pulled me 2,000 miles away from home, put me in a urban environment when I'd only ever lived more or less in the outskirts of town, on half country, half suburbs, and there was no sunshine. I grew up in Colorado.
Yeah, there is no sunshine back there.
Pittsburgh was cloudy every single day. I remember, in fact, October 6th, 1987 was the first time I saw the sun and a blue sky in Pittsburgh. And so got there, that place proceeded to just kick my butt. I couldn't get above a C- on a test, as hard as I tried, as hard as I studied. And while I'm there, I'm still drawing. I'm still doing stuff. It's my outlet. And so one of the guys in my dorm was involved with a couple of different campus clubs. He had theater club, and he liked to do sets and stuff for the theater club. And he's like, "Oh, you should do our posters." Well, the next thing you know, I'm doing posters for the drama club, and I'm doing posters for the student center, and I'm getting paid like, $200 here, $100 there. So I'm sitting there, and this would have been right at the beginning of October, right after midterms. Midterms had been abysmal. I mean, I had failed everything, and I'm sitting in my room at 3 a.m, and I'm trying to think like, how did I get here? Like, what's going on? Because I never used to struggle with this stuff, this math and stuff, the way I do here. I always had to work at it. It was never like second nature, like the drawing. And I had a project of some sketches that I was working on for another poster that was coming up for a drama production. And I had my calculus book open and my, sheet of failures in front of me. And I just thought, you know what? There seems to be a pattern here. I'm liking the drawing and I'm making money at it, and I'm terrible at this science stuff.
I hate it.
I hate it. I can't do it. So I kind of took my fate into my own hands, and I went and withdrew from all my classes there at Carnegie Mellon because I was still just ahead of the deadline to get a partial refund. And I mean, that school at that time, this is 1987, that school was $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get some of my folks' money back. I knew I couldn't get it all, but I wanted to get some. And then I got on the phone to CSU and said, look, I'm a Loveland boy. I want to come home and I want to go to art school. And their tuition was affordable. And it was close to home. So after Pittsburgh, I wanted to be someplace familiar. And they said, hey, no problem. Come on out. We'd love to have you. So I kind of swept that first semester under the rug. It never happened officially. There was really no record of it. And I came out to Colorado and went to art school at CSU.
What did your dad say when you told him you withdrew?
He was mad.
Oh, I bet he was really
well,
mad.
he was mad. And then, see, and this I think was just spiteful. So I had withdrawn from all my classes. So technically I should have gotten an incomplete rather than a grade. But somebody there at the school didn't, I guess, let the university know that I was withdrawn. So all of my test and homework scores after midterms were zeros. So my dad got a report card that showed my grade point average as being a 0.96, which my friends were jokingly calling the square root. I was in the square root club because the square root of my GPA was actually bigger than my GPA. And which, math geek humor, what are you going to do? Anyway, he was pretty upset. And of course, the fact that he was still out $12,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stamps.
Yeah, that's a lot of hard work. So he was not happy. I think he felt like I was just too willful and unfocused and not serious about life and had no self-discipline. But I said, I'm still going to college. I'm just not going to be an engineer. And he said, well, if you expect your mom and me to pay for college for tuition, you've got to go get a degree that's practical. Okay. How can I make that work in the art department? Well,
graphics, maybe.
Graphic design. Yeah. At Colorado State University, unbeknownst to most, had an excellent graphic design program. They had a couple of world-renowned graphic designers living in town who were teaching there. So I went through the graphic design program. That's my BFA. It's a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a specialty in graphic design. And that was its own kind of weird world of competition and cutthroating. And I remember my internship as just being dreadful in many ways. The art director was a great guy, and I liked the project I worked on, but it was so competitive. He had 12 of us. All of us were seniors. All of us were interning in his office. And he would come in and slap down, okay, here's our projects for this week. He did a lot of stuff with the publications office at CSU. So there were a lot of CSU related things. And he'd say, I want 3 preliminary sketches on my desk in an hour. And then I want you guys to go through this week and work up some good concepts. And the 3 I like best are going to get pitched to the client. And then you had to actually go and do the pitch as an intern. He was there, but it was like your show. And I just didn't excel in that environment. Because again, it's like I thought I had some pretty good ideas. But
Asteroids.
Yeah, no, I had some, it's, you're sort of speaking in a symbolic visual language at that point, because the university, a lot of their publications are teamwork oriented or, resident assistant outreach, as a young freshman coming in, you need to know you can count on your RA. And so the imagery is very much like, it's got to have a specific message. And I just wasn't very good at that. And I only ever got 3 projects in that whole year considered. And one of them did finally get published, but...
or maybe you were good at it and he just didn't recognize it too.
Well, that could be. I will never know the answer to that question.
Did any of those other 11 people go on to have an art career?
Not that I know of. It may be graphic design, but a lot of them didn't even make it through, I don't think, the graphic design program. We all got out of school with portfolios we couldn't really take into a firm and get a job with.
And why is that?
The internship stuff, if you were working on a project, so what you want to have in a design portfolio, if you're going to walk into a firm in San Francisco or LA or New York or Denver or wherever and get a job, you want some completed work. You want to have a dozen pieces that have been published. Or that look like they have been published. You go ahead and you pay to have them printed up and presented professionally, but published is always better. If an art director looks at your work and goes, yeah, this guy's already got 24 published pieces, you're going to be ahead of the pack at the interview. And I just didn't have that, because at the internship, what ended up happening was if you were not chosen to pursue the project, then that was the end of the work. You had a lot of unfinished sketches. You had a concept.
All of that stuff. You got nothing out of it.
You got all this work and nothing comes out of it. And the classes were much the same. You would have to spend extra time and money outside of class to finish off something, to make a portfolio piece out of. And so I ended up, again, I never said anything about this during that time, but I always kind of knew in my heart, I'm just biding my time till I can get out of here and be on my own.
Yeah, you're just getting the degree.
Yeah, getting the degree.
Partially for your father, really.
Well, to satisfy that familial,
Yeah.
get a degree, because it never hurts to have a college degree, or at least that was the conventional wisdom. But yeah, the day I walked off campus, I pitched my design portfolio in a dumpster, and I never looked back.
Did you really pitch it?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Because you just knew.
I knew it wasn't ready for a job interview, and I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was just tired of doing stuff I didn't want to do.
And so are you like 22 at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. Almost 23.
And so what do you do from there? So you have a degree. You have no portfolio. It's in the dumpster.
No portfolio.
But you have a passion that you think you can do fine art.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what do you do?
Well, so during that time, I had met the woman who would become my wife. She was an Aspen girl. She grew up there. Her folks ran a lodge in Aspen. She was a very outdoorsy, horsey girl, backcountry girl. I mean, she loved the outdoors. And she had introduced me to camping and backpacking, which was what introduced me to the Southwest, to the canyon country of southern Utah. So all the while I'm doing the busy work to get the degree, I'm making drawings of buttes and mesas and canyons.
Are these just for yourself, or did you have aspirations of maybe making paintings?
I worked them into my classwork, into my coursework in the art department. Because even though I had a graphic design specialty, I still had to pass a requisite number of fine art classes to get a BFA. So in my drawing class, I was putting together these drawings, and I remember for my portfolio review day, I had done a series of panoramic. They were 4.5 inches by 20 inches. And they were all variations on this one butte out in Utah called Factory Butte, which I had just abstracted and simplified down to almost a shape, just one two-dimensional shape, but at different times of day in different light conditions. So I had a dozen of those, which I had gone ahead and matted up. I trimmed them down. I matted them. I mean, this cost me some money to do this.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I went into my portfolio review, and the guy was not impressed because it wasn't modern art. It wasn't like, I remember one of his favorite things was a kid had taken an old burned out TV and taken the cathode ray tube out of it and taken a mannequin head. And this was an installation, right? This was one of those things, you got to be there to see it. So at the big installation for his final review, he put the mannequin head inside the burned out TV and lit it on fire. And this went over like, they were just raving about what a visionary this guy was. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? This is crazy.
Did that person go on to do anything? Do you know?
Just, I
working on an appliance
probably
store?
managing an auto parts store or something.
So
now.
As far as you know, he didn't. But they didn't like your beautiful deconstructed buttes. Do you still have those?
Somewhere, I think I do.
Yeah, those didn't get tossed in the trash can then.
I don't know. I have a big envelope full of crap in my studio that's like from student days somewhere, and I don't know if I might have had a fit of pique later on and thrown them away. I did have those periodically where I'd go through and destroy a bunch of stuff because I just thought, this is
not good enough.
This is so much wasted time. I don't even want to look at it. It pains me to have it in my presence. So
I'd like to find out about this. So you're 23. You're now with a girl. You fall in love. You backpack, and you must at some point go, okay, we got to go do our own thing and move somewhere else.
Yes. So we had a very fortuitous happenstance. We went to Carbondale. My wife's parents had a ranch up there, and we wanted to get married there. So we graduated from school in May. We moved to Carbondale, and we just kind of bummed around that summer. We, went hiking and just sort of enjoyed life before real life, and got ready for the wedding. And got married in August, and a week later, the neighbor who had a 200 odd acre horse ranch, 2 arenas, a 20-stall barn, a lot of high-end horses. She calls up my wife and says, "Oh, your dad said that you had a degree in equine science from Colorado State and that you knew your way around horses. I just fired my barn manager. When can you start?" And that job came with a house to live in and the princely salary of $1,500 a month.
That's pretty good, really.
And again, we're talking 1992.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's pretty damn good.
so we happened into this situation, which allowed me to pursue the painting and to pursue the drawing. And I just told my wife, I said, I want you to know this is what I want to do with my life. I really think I can do it, and I want to do it, and at least try. I want to give it a good, fair shot. Mm-hmm. And she was supportive. She, for a long time, was the only one who was supportive of the idea of Steve as a fine artist and making a living at it. And so that's what I did. I took a part-time job just to buy my own paint and stuff so that my work didn't impact the household finances. And I just started working. And in the beginning, I was working from photos and working in the house, doing a lot of pastels at that time because I had a lot left over from school and they were fairly affordable. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have solvents and all this other stuff. I didn't have a studio space that I could use. And I was approaching galleries. So when I got a body of pastels done, which were all of various arches and natural bridges that I had visited, I took them up to a gallery in Basalt and said, here's what I do. I spent almost $1,000 getting them framed. Mm-hmm. I took them in ready to present stuff, thinking, well, if they say yes, I don't want to be caught out, not having enough work. So they said yes. And then when the partner arrived, no. It was two ladies that owned this 50-50.
Wow. And they told you that? Yes, then no?
Yeah. The original partner said, I think we can probably do something with these. Let me keep them and show them to my partner.
Yeah.
And so I left them there, went home. A couple of weeks go by, and I'm sending people up there like, yeah, they've got some stuff of mine at this gallery. You should go see it. And everybody would come back and say, well, Steve, we didn't see any of your stuff. Are you sure it was that gallery? Yeah. So finally I went back up there and I said, what the heck is going on? And they were in the closet because the other partner had come in and gone, what the hell is this? We can't use this, but they never called me to come pick it up.
Oh my gosh.
They just shunted it in the closet.
So did you get your material and said, thank you very much? Adios,
I did.
amigos?
I did. I got it back.
It's really insulting. It had to be kind of devastating for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it made me mad.
Yeah.
I have some Sicilian on my dad's side of the family, so it's like, I'll show you,
Yeah, sure. And did you go? Where'd you go from there? Did you go and see if you could find another gallery right away?
Yeah. So I went to a couple of other galleries. I ended up at a place in Redstone, Colorado called the Redstone Gallery, and they hung some stuff up and they sold a few. They didn't sell very many of them. It was the wrong kind of subject for that market, which I can see now. At that time, I just thought, well, these are good drawings, so somebody will see them and want them.
And was this drawings you were selling?
Yeah, pastel drawings. They were all 18 by 24 inches.
Yeah. But the subject matter wasn't of that.
Desert, arches, natural bridges, buttes, that sort of stuff. Yeah. And,
same stuff you like now.
Same stuff I'm doing now. And so after a couple of years, I entered some local shows. I got a little bit better. I went and took a workshop from Skip, who I mentioned earlier, in plein air painting. He's really the guy who sort of said, look, here's how it works. You get this equipment, you get these paints, you go out, you paint, and you paint, and you paint, and you paint, which is what I did. So in the first 3 years after I started plein air painting, I think I did somewhere around 2,200 field studies.
Wow.
I was really doing 4 a day.
Yeah, you were out there. You were cooking it.
Yep. Dawn till dusk.
And you got your chops really fast, I bet.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get kicked in the face a lot, but you have to put in that time to understand how light works on a landscape, to understand how atmosphere works and weather and what, air looks different when it's cold than it does when it's warm. Those sorts of things are the only way you can get that is to go out and do it. But as I was getting better, I was getting more interest. So there's a gallery in Carbondale. That's my very first representation of my oil paintings. And I still show with them today. They don't sell a huge amount of work, but they really do sell it in the season. And they gave me a chance and said, we think you've got something here.
And how old were you at this time?
So at that point in time, this would have been 95. So I'm 27 years old.
Yeah. So by this time, you're starting to make some progress.
Yes. And starting to make some money at it.
And you're selling primary plein air paintings at this point?
Yeah. I still had no studio space of my own. So I was working outside to make a living. I had no choice. If I wanted to make paintings to sell, I had to be outside. So I was outside every day. Didn't matter what season, what weather, just went out and did it.
And how many years did you do that?
That went for 3 years. And then another fellow that Skip introduced me to, Dan Young, you probably have heard his name. He had an old studio that he had used that was on his folks' property. And it was just this uninsulated shack with this weird looking little stove. It took about 2 hours to warm up in the winter down by the Roaring Fork River. And it was all Western exposure. So I had to get there first thing in the morning and paint. I could paint till about 1 in the afternoon, and then the light started to come in through the windows. The building was never designed to be an artist's studio. So he let me use that to do some larger paintings, which for me at that time was maybe 18 by 24, 20 by 24. And then another acquaintance of mine from years and years back who lived up there, he was an architect, and he was building a new studio building on the side, outside of his home, separate. And he said, if you come up here, spend a summer helping me build this, you can have a quarter of it for your own work. So that was really my first studio, my first proper studio. And that launched my first solo show in Denver in 1999.
And where was that?
It was a little place called Elizabeth Schlosser Fine Art down at 3rd and Detroit in Cherry Creek.
And how did she find you? How did you find her?
Well, so a lot of the gallery meetings I've had in life have come about because somebody who knows me or has known my work mentioned me to somebody at a gallery.
Yeah, happened with us.
That's what happened with you guys. That's what happened with Elizabeth. A couple of collectors from Carbondale who knew the gallery there liked to go down to Denver. They had family there. So they would go down and walk around the art galleries in Cherry Creek and, make a fun day out of it. And I remember she said, you should go talk to Elizabeth. She would be someone that could probably really do good work for you. And I bet you'd fit in her gallery. So I went down there and I took a portfolio of framed, ready to hang paintings. And she kind of took a look at them and said, well, I think there's some potential here. I'm going to be in Carbondale next week. I want to come up to your studio and see what you got up there. And I had half a dozen larger canvases going. And she came up and visited, and we talked for about an hour. And she said, okay, I'm going to put you on the calendar for a show. Like, it wasn't like, let's try it for a month. It was, I'm having a show for you.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So first show in 1999, opening night, we sold about 3/4 of the show, and there was 40 paintings in that show.
Oh, that's really good. So she saw something clearly.
She saw something, and she was just a terrific seller and a terrific representative in Denver. I mean, she really brought people in to see her artists. And I didn't know it at the time, but I found out later she actually was one of the spearheads of the Paramount Theater restoration. Paramount Theater was a historic theater in Denver that had gone into disrepair, as they often do. And she had been a moving force behind that project, getting that funding raised and getting that theater restored. So she really had the connections as well. And so she did great for me for 4 or 5 years, but she kept getting offers on her building, being in the prime location that it was.
In Denver.
Denver, 3rd and Detroit. That's the heart of Cherry Creek.
Yeah.
And she kept getting these offers that were higher and higher. So at one point she got an offer she just felt she could not refuse.
Yeah.
And she called me up and said, well, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but I think I'm going to bow out, spend more time with my husband, spend more time with the kids, do some other projects. And I wouldn't ordinarily do this, but somebody just offered me more money for this building than I've made in 15 years of selling art.
Yeah, it's hard to
hard to say no to that,
And so that's a big kick in the teeth for you too.
Yeah.
That's your primary producer, I guess, at that point, right?
She was the primary producer, but by that time, another fortuitous introduction from a collector had gotten me into a little gallery in Taos, New Mexico. And that gallery ended up being my top seller for 9 years. Yeah. And she worked hard. She had a good list, and she just brought people in. She cultivated artists, and she had some demands of her own that eventually caused me to decide maybe I needed to move on. But she could sell the paintings, and she we'd have a show down there and it was usually 30 or 40 paintings, and the majority of them small, maybe 10 in the larger size range.
Yeah, and you really were kind of doing smaller work at that time. And again, it's more plein air still, right?
Still mostly plein air. And the studio paintings, by this point, we're talking 2002, 2003. I had actually gotten a little bit more accustomed to doing studio work, having a reliable studio with like heat and good light,
right,
where I could work. Like, this place next to my friend's house, that was my studio for 5 or 6 years, because even though I at times had to commute an hour to get there, it was a good place to work. And I had another pair of eyes on hand that I could have. I'd say, come over here and tell me what you think about this, because I'm struggling, So that enabled me to start really cutting my teeth on big canvases. And I remember the first 30 by 40 I ever attempted. It was a disaster, but it was like, okay, well, you need to keep going. You can do this. And so every time I'd move up a little in size and have a success, it was like, all right, I can do this.
And so when did you go from plein air painting to this more cutting edge kind of angular, deconstructed imagery? I know when I first started representing you, you were doing both, and you know exactly the ones I liked. So.
I absolutely. Well, so I think I have you to thank in part for that, because I remember that first conversation we had where we were going through my website and you were sort of saying, yeah, I like this, and then, this not so much. And you mentioned to me that kind of style really appealed to you, and you thought that it could probably do well in the gallery. And that resonated with me because up until that point, when you're working in a sort of impressionist way, all the teachers I had, all the artists that I had workshopped with and had sought advice from, they all worked in that manner.
Yeah, plein air.
Plein air. And so I was always getting critiques about soften your edges. Don't be so angular,
right?
Gentler, tone those colors down. The colors are too much, the nature doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
And that started to grate after a while, because I felt an impulse towards those angular brushstrokes, towards those angular compositions, and towards that vibrant color harmony, because that was, to me, that was like my natural way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's like handwriting. You don't really think about what your handwriting looks like. You're just writing,
Yeah.
And it looks a certain way because that's just what comes out of you. And so after that conversation with you, I really took that to heart, and I sort of said, here again, these things kind of repeat in life. And here's another case where a lot of people are telling me what they think I should do and what they think's right for me.
Right.
And I'm not feeling it. I'm not there. I want to say something unique. And I'm watching plein air go from kind of this thing on the out fringes and nobody had really thought about much. Serious artists were doing it, but it wasn't a phenomenon. And now I'm seeing it suddenly become this phenomenon. Everybody's talking about plein air. There's magazines and all kinds of stuff going on. And I'm going, there's got to be more to it for me than just this. Like, plein air is a means, but it's not an end.
Mm-hmm.
So after chatting with you, I went home and I told my wife about our conversation, and I said, this is what Mark thinks I should do. And she said, well, yeah, if that's the way you want to go, if that's naturally the way you already want to go, then do it and see where it takes you, see what happens.
Yeah, I think I had even said that. You gotta want to go that direction. I can't say you go that direction, because you had done a fantastic piece. I remember it was the Catalina Mountains, and it was so different than the other things, so different. And the other stuff I've seen lots of, and there's out there, but I hadn't seen anything like that.
Yeah,
it was very different, and it appealed to me immensely. And I was like, if you can go in this direction, then there's something there for sure, 100%.
Yeah. And it felt good. It felt very freeing to be able to do that, to finally just say, the heck with all this other stuff. Like, I'm going to have my own ideas and I'm going to make them come to life on a canvas. And, and that's not to disrespect the advice that I was getting, but, here we are. We've just had the Dixon book come out, and the show has opened, and we've gotten to hear about his life and his thoughts on this. And And reading through that book, it's like you get a very clear portrait of a guy who was very individual.
Oh, so much.
Fiercely individual. And I just thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like here's, and that's one of the reasons why Dixon resonates with me so much, is because here's a guy who kind of went through the same sort of things.
He did.
And he ended up creating something stylistically that still has never been duplicated. And his thought processes, the things that informed those paintings, that's on a whole different level than most people are used to working.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's exciting to me. It's like, I want to work on that level. I want to see what I can do with this. And yes, nature and landscape is what inspires me. That's the thing I love to paint. But painting it in this way, to me, is it's so much fun, and it's so interesting to kind of explore not just the surface appearance of the landscape, but the structure, the geometry.
Yeah,
of it.
the geometry.
That's
what it
coming
is.
back to that math thing again. It's like I see geometries. My brain, that's just how my brain works. I look at a cloud and I think, okay, there's some angles in there, and there's I don't necessarily see the big curves. I just think, what would that look like if it was just a big square?
It's like huge fractals.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a thing I hadn't even heard of. And then somebody said, oh, it's like fractals. And I went, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like the what again?
Well, we all are fractals, really. It's
Yeah.
just, you got to look close enough.
Yeah.
And so when you go out and do little paintings now, they're in that format, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're in that fractile geometry.
And a lot of the little paintings get started outside, but not finished outside.
Yeah.
Because going
Makes
into
sense.
the studio, I can get basic colors and a basic palette set up, which is really what outside gives you. It gives you a basis, gives you a baseline for greens, reds, whatever. Then you can come back in the studio and take that blocked in thing and turn it from, a true statement of things as they are to an idea, a statement of an idea about this thing. Because what I think is inspiring about the landscape isn't the facts on the ground, so to speak. It's how the idea makes me feel, and how like the mass of that cloud, or the shadow on that butte, or the shape of those things, the shape of those spires, or the light bouncing around in this canyon. Like that's the thing that I'm interested in. So how do I make that personal to me?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of showcase the structure of the landscape and the way that structure enhances the qualities of those clouds and that light. Because it's the structure of a painting that gives you that. And the composition, really, at the end of the day, is what it's all about as a starting point. If you want to paint a picture of clouds, you don't put your horizon 3/4 of the way up the canvas, So then how do you arrange the geometry of that to make it work?
Does it take you longer to paint these paintings than it does what you were doing in the past?
Oh, yes.
I would assume.
Yes.
Yeah, especially these big ones that you've been doing.
Yeah, yeah. I find with an average field study, if I'm out for 2 hours, I used to be able to knock out a painting in 2 hours. 2 hours now is about enough time for me to block it in, and then I got to quit and go home to the studio and finish it, because I can't say everything I want to say. I can't mix the subtle colors. The other thing about this kind of technique that I have is I can juxtapose very subtle variations in color.
Yes, you can.
And that's going to do something different to your eye when you're up close than it does when you're far away. But I need time to do that, because I have to harmonize these colors very precisely. And in controlled conditions, that becomes much easier. When you're outside, it's very hard to do that.
And your big paintings, I know one of them took you almost 4 months to do, right? That one that we had?
Actually, yeah, that first show, that Dead Horse Point painting, yeah, that was a 4-month continuous labor for 4 months. So,
and our next show, which we're doing coming up this next year in 2020, January, you've gone from a guy that just does smaller paintings to now you're going to do maybe 7 big major paintings that are all going to be, what do you think, 3x4 kind of thing?
Yeah. But probably the biggest will be maybe 40 by 60, 48 by 48.
Yeah.
I let the subject dictate the format. So I've got a couple of ideas right now that I'm working on that'll 30 by 72 to 36 by 72, big panorama. But yeah, I'm working on ideas that are, again, personal to me, but I always seem to go find these weird little spots that nobody's ever really thought to look at before. And they're iconic, really. They're very landmark Western
They will be if
landscapes.
they're not. Once you put it in a big painting like that, they're going to
I hope so. But so I've got some ideas for some offbeat subjects that I think are quintessentially Western, quintessentially Southwest, desert, but that might offer a way of seeing these things that you hadn't really thought of. Like they might just be drive-bys. You know, you're in Arches National Park, you're on your way to go up and see the big landscape arch or whatever. There's a painting in the show that's something you will drive right past. And if you drove past it at any other time, you would probably be like, yeah, that's cool. But I happen to be there in the wintertime when there's snow, right at dusk, when you got that beautiful red light. So it's like, this is so juicy, you know?
Well, you know, and the thing is, people don't realize this, but we've been working on this show for 2 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an undertaking. People don't, you know, it's not like that one person who just said, okay, let's have a show.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's an undertaking.
Yeah.
For both of us, actually.
Yeah.
Not as much for you, not as much for me, clearly, as it is for you. I mean, you have to do the hard lifting, but at the same time, it's a, you know, you got to get it on the schedule and you have to start thinking about it and start talking about it to people. So listen, people who are out there, you know, when you hear this is, you know, this is what it takes. And I fully expect a sellout on that one.
Well, I can only hope that my work meets the high standards of your audience, and that they feel compelled to buy it.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
They will.
like you say, if you don't love it, well, but these are paintings that I'm enthusiastic about, ideas that I'm enthusiastic about.
Yes.
And some of them are things that I have been thinking about painting for several years. So
in fact, you told me, you said the only way I could do this is they have to be areas that I'm really into.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to do a themed kind of a show because you get locked in and then it's like, oh, I'm in this fence and I can't go outside, but there's really cool stuff out on the other side of the fence. So it's, you know, best I can do is to just say, I'm going to show you some things I've never painted before. I'm going to show you some things that, like I say, I hope will maybe make you think twice about driving by. As you're driving through the West and looking around, you know, really stop for a moment. You know,
we should do a map and have it out with the little dots where these things are. I think that'd be very cool, actually.
We can make a map. Yeah. And you know, there are going to be things that have touched me in one way or another. And you know, obviously from a visual perspective, things that I find visually striking. But again, there's an element of idea in each of these things. There's a little bit of a subtext, I hope. I mean, I'm not trying to make some kind of like super esoteric statement or anything. It's about the beauty of the West and the connection I feel to that. But, you know, I like sometimes for people to see things in paintings and go, huh, that's interesting. You know, this could actually be very iconic. You know, it's a very iconic Western idea.
Presented in a unique way.
Yeah, presented in a way that gives you a sense of that. Like, I'm seeing this and going, this is true West. You know, this is as much true West as all of the famous landmarks that you will see. And that's the other thing about this show. You know, there might, I don't want to rule out and say, well, there's not going to be anything from a national park or anything like that. No well-known vistas, no postcards. I'm not going to limit myself in that way, but I will tell you that the bulk of the show are going to be ordinary things. Like I say, that, you know, if you were driving too fast or looking the wrong way or not there at the right time, you'd miss it.
Yeah. Well, it's the cover of my Dixon book.
So
it's, you know, he called it Shiprock Mesa, but it's Table Mesa.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, Shiprock is the big iconic image, but behind it is this beautiful little mesa.
Yeah.
That, as far as I'm concerned, is just as gorgeous.
Yeah.
And clearly Dixon did as well. And clearly you do as well on some of these things too.
I see so much stuff. I get vexed sometimes because I can't paint them all.
Yeah.
I see paintings everywhere. You know, I'm like the kid in the movie. I see paintings everywhere. It's like
There's only so much time you can do it.
there's only so much time. Yep.
All right, Stephen, we've talked for over an hour and a half. I know you don't
my
believe
gosh.
that. I know you got to hit on the road and get going.
I got to get going. Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time and effort, and I'm just a fan. And thanks, man.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. I can't wait to see the new stuff, which is coming. For me, that's as exciting as anything. That's like Christmas for me.
Yeah.
When I get those paintings, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
just like in heaven. Look at that. What did he do? Oh, I want that one. I want that one.
It's I delight in seeing how, you know, you guys react to the artwork.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
I just dread the day when you go, really?
That's That's never going to happen. You don't let a bad painting out of your studio. I've found that out.
Yeah, I destroy them.
Yeah, I know. I can tell. Yeah, you never let anything bad out.
Yeah,
Which means we don't get as much, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I'd rather have great than mediocre.
I would rather you have great than mediocre too, because it makes your job easier.
So much easier.
Yeah,
and it's more fulfilling. And I feel good about when I place one of these pieces with one of my clients, and I know I'm giving them something of quality that I would put in my house.
And, you know, my hope for the paintings, as much as insofar as I can control it, is that the people who take them home never fall out of love with them.
Yeah.
You know, that to the last day, there are still things of beauty and mystery and inspiration, and then they just tickle you. You know, the art that I have, what little I have in my house, that's what it is for me. Is it's like these things I just always love looking at them.
Yeah. Well, I love your paintings. Stephen Datz, thanks for coming on the Art Dealer Diary.
You're most welcome, Mark.
Right, I'll let you get back to your cold Colorado.
Okay.
Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, ebooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.